I asked when the wedding is, and my daughter-in-law said, "We got married yesterday." My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 72 years old, a widow, and once a bookkeeper who spent her life balancing numbers. But beyond the ledgers and invoices, I invested most deeply in love, especially in my only son, Tyler, and his wife, Madison. I believed that by supporting them, I was building a strong, lasting family. For 3 years, I covered their rent, filled their refrigerator, paid for their emergencies, and even bought the furniture in their living room. More than $33,000 disappeared from my savings into theirs. I never thought of it as a loss. To me, it was love expressed in dollars and cents. To them, it was nothing more than withdrawals. Then came the day that broke me. I stood in my living room clutching the pale pink dress I had chosen for what I thought would be Tyler's wedding, but my name wasn't even on the guest list. The moment of realization came through a phone call. I had dialed Tyler, eager to ask when the ceremony would be held. Before he could answer, Madison's voice cut in. With a smile I could almost hear, she said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday." "We only invited special people, special people." I froze. For years, I had gone without so they could live comfortably. I had skipped meals, deferred vacations, and used my late husband's careful savings to keep them afloat. But in their eyes, I wasn't special enough to even sit in a chair at my son's wedding. Later that evening, the photographs appeared online. Madison glowing in the white gown partly paid for with the $800 I had given her a month earlier. Tyler standing proudly beside her, her parents and siblings lifting glasses of champagne, celebrating a day that excluded me entirely. I scrolled through every smiling face. My dress remained untouched in the closet, my matching shoes unworn, and the envelope with $1,000 I had prepared as a gift hidden away in my desk drawer. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in silence, staring at the dress. My love had been good enough to pay their bills, but my presence wasn't good enough to witness their vows. It was the kind of exclusion that went deeper than hurt. It exposed the truth I had been refusing to see. In the days that followed, I replayed every sacrifice in my mind. And finally, one afternoon, I pulled out a notebook. If numbers were the only thing they valued, then I would speak in numbers. Rent, $500 a month for 36 months, $18,000. Groceries, $200 a month, another $7,200. Gifts, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, $3,000. Medical emergency, $800. Car loan I covered, $2,500. Living room furniture, $1,200. Air conditioner repair, $600. The total stared back at me, $33,400. That was my retirement savings, my late husband's legacy, the peace I was supposed to enjoy in old age. Instead, I had been financing 2 able-bodied adults who rewarded me with betrayal. Looking at the page, it felt like staring into a cracked vase I had poured myself into. No matter how much I gave, it would never be enough to fill. And so, when the phone rang a week later and Madison's trembling voice pleaded, "Evelyn, the rent is overdue. The landlord is threatening eviction. You forgot to make the transfer," I finally knew what my answer would be. The phone call from Madison came in the early evening. Her voice was no longer smug, no longer laced with superiority. Instead, it trembled with panic. "Evelyn, we're behind on the rent again. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, we'll be out on the street. Could you please send the money?" I sat in my recliner, the same one I had purchased over a decade ago, worn but dependable. Her words hung in the air. For years, I had wired money without hesitation, treating their struggles as my responsibility. But this time, I didn't reach for my checkbook. "Madison," I said slowly, choosing each word carefully, "I believe you and Tyler will need to handle this yourselves." Silence stretched across the line. Then came her scoff. Sharp, dismissive, desperate. "You can't be serious." After everything you've done for us? You can't just stop now, but I had already stopped. In my heart, something had shifted the moment I saw those wedding photos. That pink dress in my closet became more than a symbol of exclusion. It was a reminder that my sacrifices had turned me invisible. Madison, I replied softly, I was never invited to your wedding. I suppose my money was welcome, but my presence was not. That was the day I realized something. I have been paying rent for a life that does not include me. That ends now. Her voice sharpened with anger. So you're just going to let us get evicted? After all you've done, you're going to abandon us now? I swallowed. It wasn't easy. Motherhood had conditioned me to rescue, to give without limits. But I had come to understand something painful. Enabling isn't love. It's a slow erosion of both respect and dignity. No, I said firmly, I'm not abandoning you. I'm allowing you to stand on your own. There's a difference. I ended the call before she could respond further. My hand trembled as I set the phone down, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. That night, I didn't stare at the ceiling worrying about their bills. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I chose myself." The next morning, my son called. His tone was not as panicked as Madison's, but I could hear the strain. "Mom, Madison said you refused to help." "Is that true?" "It is," I answered calmly. "Why?" he demanded. "You've always been there for us." "We're counting on you." His words stung. Not "we love you," not "we miss you," just "we're counting on you," as if I were a bank with no closing hours. "Tyler," I whispered, "do you even realize what you've taken from me?" More than $30,000. That was my safety. Net my retirement. Your father's legacy. And still, you chose to marry without me, as though I were a stranger. Tell me, son, am I your mother, or just your ATM? The silence that followed told me everything. He had no answer. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I poured myself a cup of tea, stepped onto my porch, and felt the evening breeze brush against my face. For the first time in years, I felt free. The days after those phone calls were strangely quiet. No text messages asking for grocery money, no missed calls with panicked voices on the other end, no subtle guilt trips wrapped in, "We just need a little help." For the first time in years, my phone sat silent. At first, I thought I would feel guilty. That maternal instinct, so ingrained, so relentless, whispered that I had abandoned my only child. But the truth was different. Every morning I woke up without that knot of anxiety in my stomach. I no longer checked my bank balance with dread. I no longer calculated which corners of my own life I could cut just to patch the holes in theirs. Instead, I began rediscovering the simple joys I had ignored. I took long walks through the park, stopping to notice the trees instead of rushing home to answer another desperate call. I visited the library and checked out novels that had once gathered dust on my reading list. I even joined a local seniors painting class, where I found myself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in what felt like forever. But quiet doesn't last long in a house built on years of noise. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Madison stood there. Her makeup was smudged, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Behind her, Tyler lingered with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "We need to talk," Madison said without preamble, her tone more demanding than pleading. I stepped aside and let them in, though every instinct told me I was inviting a storm into my living room. Madison started pacing, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "We're 2 months behind on rent. The landlord is threatening legal action. We're drowning, Evelyn. You can't just turn your back on us." Tyler finally spoke, his voice low. "Mom, we're desperate." I looked at my son, the same boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had helped cover, whose adulthood I had quietly financed, and yet here he was, standing before me, not as a grateful son, but as a man who saw me as a solution, not a person. I didn't turn my back on you, I said evenly. I gave you every tool to build a life. I paid for years of it, but you chose to build it without me. Madison scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, so this is about the wedding again? You're punishing us because you didn't get an invitation. The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. This isn't about a wedding, I said softly. It's about respect, about love, about acknowledgement. I was good enough to bankroll your lives, but not good enough to sit in a chair on the most important day of your lives. That was your choice, and this is mine. The room fell silent. Tyler's shoulders sagged, his eyes downcast. Madison, on the other hand, glared at me with a mix of frustration and disbelief, as though I were breaking some unspoken contract. I love you, Tyler, I whispered, but love cannot survive when it's treated like currency. I won't buy my place in your life anymore. With that, I stood, walked to the front door, and opened it wide. The message was clear. The conversation was over. They left without another word. The silence that followed was heavier, but this time it was mine. And in that silence, I felt something powerful rising within me, an independence I had long buried under obligation. After that night, I expected more calls, more pleading, maybe even angry visits, but instead, there was only distance. Weeks stretched into months, and Tyler and Madison disappeared from my daily life as though I had been cut away. At first, the silence ached. The absence of my son felt like a hollow place inside my chest. But then, slowly, something shifted. The space they left behind gave me room to breathe. For years, I had been pouring myself into their lives, patching their problems while mine collected dust. Now, for the first time, I could turn my attention inward. I began organizing my home, not just physically, but emotionally. I donated boxes of clothes, old linens, and trinkets I no longer needed. With every bag that left the house, I felt lighter. I painted the spare bedroom in soft lavender and turned it into a reading room, filled with books and sunlight. The pink dress I had once chosen for Tyler's wedding, I donated that too. It no longer represented pain, it represented release. Financially, I restructured my life. I sat with a financial advisor, reviewed my savings, and realized that while I couldn't regain what I had already given, I could protect what remained. For the first time in years, my bank account reflected my choices, not theirs. And then came the joys I hadn't expected. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from, joining them for brunches and Sunday walks. I laughed more. I even took a weekend bus trip to the seaside, something I had put off countless times while wiring money to Tyler. Standing at the shore, feeling the cool water wash over my feet, I whispered to myself, "This is what freedom feels like." One afternoon, months later, I received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, Tyler's. My hands shook as I opened it. "Mom," it began, "I know you think I don't appreciate everything you've done, but I do. I made mistakes. Madison and I thought we could manage, but without your help, we've had to face reality. We're working extra hours, cutting back, learning what it means to actually be responsible. It hasn't been easy, but maybe this was what we needed. I just want you to know, I love you." I'm sorry tears slipped down my cheeks as I read those words, not because they erased the hurt, but because they proved something important. By stepping back, I had finally given my son the gift I should have given long ago, the chance to grow. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, beside the page where I had once written, "Today I chose myself." That evening, I sat on my porch, the sun setting in streaks of gold and pink. I realized something profound. Sometimes love means giving, but sometimes it means letting go. And in letting go, I hadn't just freed Tyler, I had freed myself. For 72 years, I had lived for others, but now I was living for me. And that, I realized, was the beginning of a new life, one built not on sacrifice, but on self-respect.